And thank everyone for being here this morning, an hour earlier than usual. I was telling Natasha this isn't necessarily my favorite day of the year. Shift everything, but at the same time, I have to appreciate her take on it. She said to me, "Oh, in a couple of days, you'll be over that." And she's right, I'll adjust to it. It's good to have all of you here on this spring day. I titled my talk Forward March because this is the month of March and we had to move the day forward by 1 hour. You know, there was a woman who complained to her, she actually wrote a letter to her weatherman on the TV station. And she said, "I really want to complain about you adding a whole hour to the day because my plants now will probably get scorched. And I'm not going to like that at all once my plants are scorched." Seriously, think about that. So the weatherman repeated that on television. I got a big kick out of it. That he actually added a day added an hour to the day. Well, so here we are at this time of year, and so I took this opportunity to do some thinking and perusing in my mind about what's going on in the world around us and this whole idea of forward march. You know, that is a command that is given by, it's a kind of a military command or a command that is given to a group of people so that they'll all fall into sort of a lockstep and they'll all go in the same direction together. And that, you know, we have two political parties that we focus on mainly at. I dare say we actually have maybe 3 or 4, but right now we seem to have 2 major political parties. We call them Republican and Democrat, but basically what they are is philosophies of how to deal with life. And one of them is called, used to be called liberal, and that became sort of a not, you know, but pejorative word. So that was changed, and now they call themselves, or if you're a member of that party, we call ourselves, or however you want to look at it. We say progressive, and the other side says conservative. I've always wondered about this conservative part because I wonder what they're conserving. I've looked at this and not really been able to see what it is. But I think about it, and I try to be as open-minded as I possibly can about it because I have so many friends, so many people that I grew up with and that I've known for a long, long time who view things that way. I find myself sort of going back and forth some of the ideas that I hear from the conservative movement, I say, yeah, I agree with that. I agree that we should have a balanced budget. I agree that we should live on the money, that you should pay as you go and so forth. I think that's a good idea. We shouldn't be in this horrible deep debt that we're in. Just imagine in your own family, if you will, that your father spends all the money there is, runs up a big debt, and then he's gone, and he leaves that debt and all that service to pay on that debt to his children. That to me just logically makes sense. Let's try not to do that. However, what I see mainly from the 2 parties is a call to let's all get together and march in one direction. But they're not the same direction. We've got one party that wants to move. They call it forward, and they say, let's move forward. Let's take things as they are, and let's try to build on that and make it a better world in that sense. But that comes at a cost, as I was saying. It comes at a great cost. And since the money isn't there, we'll just borrow the money. So that is going on one side. Then the other side, the conservative side, is saying to their people, forward march, and they're marching forward towards a goal that has already been established, and they like that goal very much. I like the way things have always been, and I want them to continue to be that way. I like the way that who is in control, and I want to continue to be a part of that group that's in control. I like the idea that certain people have power and that there's a certain language that's spoken and so forth. So you see one group, the conservative group, wanting to keep things as they are, and the other group wanting to change things and see things as they could be. And Now, it sounds like I am prejudiced towards one group, I'm sure. But in reality, I'm not. I'm not. Like I said, I have friends that I've had for years and years and years who see things in this one way, and I see things in another way. And I have seen things in another way for years and years and years. We develop this amongst ourselves. We develop these attitudes. We take it on and we give it a label, and we prescribe ourselves to that label, proscribe ourselves to that label. And we describe ourselves in terms of, well, I'm more conservative, or I'm more liberal or progressive in this way. I like what our President of the United States now has said about all that. Rather than seeing ourselves as liberals, conservatives, Tea Party, progressive, and now you can add to that, you can add one more party to that, right, which is going on right now. You can add that extra party, which has always been present, just not a lot of people have been talking about it. Democratic socialism. The word social is just like a knee-jerk reaction for some people. But we've always had democratic socialism. At least we've had it since Franklin Roosevelt has been around. It's part of the fabric of our society. It's odd that some people will say, down with socialism, but don't touch my Social Security, or don't touch Medicare. They like those things. They agree that those things should be a part of the fabric of our nation, but they don't really get the idea that they are a part of this social democracy that we have created here in the United States. Well, from a spiritual standpoint, though, which is what I am, I'm not a politician, I'm a spiritual leader, and I think of that in terms of that. I want to look at that a moment and see what that does to us when we label ourselves or label others. The first thing it does when we are labeling others or labeling ourselves is create an us and a them. It just does. It creates an us and a them. It creates a right and a wrong, whichever side of that you're on. It does. It creates this. I'm seeing, and I'm sure you are too, in our country, more of a polarization further and further to the right on one extreme, further and further to the left on the other extreme. And those people who used to be in the middle seem to be scoffed at, and they're not considered to be a real important part of the fabric of what's going on in our politic in this nation. It's too bad. It's really a shame that someone like Dwight David Eisenhower, a great general and a wonderful human being, who was considered to be a Republican, a conservative person, today would not be honored in his own party because of the beliefs that he had. From a spiritual standpoint, he, having experienced war, detested war. Just detested it. He said, if you've ever been in war, there's nothing good about it. Nothing. He warned us in his last speech that he gave to the nation to beware of the military and industrial complex. He was the one who gave us that warning. And so here we are today, living in the physical world in an almost oligarchical type of situation. I say here we are today, but I'm beginning to believe that it's always been that way. You know, there's an old statement that says, and it's sort of a statement that's against distributing wealth. It says, okay, if you took all the money in the world and took it away from those who have it, and you gave it to those who didn't have it, spread it out equally, in a year's time, those that had it before would have it again, and those that didn't have any would be broke again. There's some truth to that statement. The truth of the statement comes because of consciousness. It comes from consciousness. Those who have will have more. Those who have not, even that which they have will be taken away from them. This is a matter of consciousness. It's not a matter of dollars and cents. It's not a matter of stuff. The stuff is just symbols for consciousness. So it's very important for us when we are viewing our neighbor, viewing those who have a different point of view than us, not to take on and become an army against them, but rather get ourselves, as the President of the United States has told us, to stop seeing parties, stop seeing ideologies, and start seeing ourselves as one country, one nation, once again. You know, Abraham Lincoln was sort of in that same position at that time, in his time in history. He had just suffered one of the greatest schisms that could ever happen in a country, a war over causes that were just so important to both sides. One side is saying, this is our way of life and we want to stick to it, and we don't want anything to change that way of life, and we want to be able to have the right to decide for ourselves whether or not our way of life continues on or not. The other side was saying, the way of life that you want should be abolished. The way of life that you are presently accepting as being the norm and the only way needs to go. Sure, it's going to be painful, but it needs to go. And we need to all stay together on this for a larger vision. Well, you know, in some respects, we're at the same place again. So what is it that's not changing, that all this time could pass and yet we're still having the same kinds of arguments, the same things? What's happening is that consciousness is not changing. We still have those who say, I like things the way they are, and I like the way things were. And I want now to be the way it used to be. And I want it to stay that way. We have others on the other side saying, no, things are moving on. They're moving on. And what we want you to do is stay with us and march forward together. All of us march forward together. The two are starting to get further and further and further apart in their ideologies. It's up to us, as people that call themselves unity people, to unify. It is up to us to do this. In order to do this, we have to take it down from a macrocosm to a microcosm. I mean by that we need to go within and examine our own thoughts and our own views of the way we see things. Do we want to continue to be on the side of what we call right and see everyone else as an other? Or do we want to be able to express the love that Jesus wanted us to express? You know, he was a very inclusive guy. He included everyone. There wasn't anyone that he didn't think was properly possible to be in the kingdom of heaven. It required a change of mind and a change of heart. It's all it required. It required a getting real and paying attention to who you really are, as opposed to that which you think you ought to be to others. Rather than identifying with that outer life, it's very important for us to identify with the inclusivity of the inner. You know, our spirits inside us, our souls, doesn't recognize. Our souls do not recognize whatsoever any difference in anyone. Whatsoever. Now, a child has not been trained and conditioned to see an other. A child is just fully curious and welcomes any and all things, sometimes to their own detriment. That's why kids get hurt sometimes. Something is interesting to them. Oh, I remember once in my own life, there was a cutest little champagne gold Cocker Spaniel next door. And there was a chain link fence between me and that Cocker Spaniel. And I loved that little dog. He was just so pretty and silky and soft looking. So I stuck my hand through there to pet him. And he bit me because I scared him. I scared him. But I didn't realize that at the time. All I knew was, don't tell your mom. That's the only thing I knew was pull your hand back and don't tell your mom. How did I know that? As being like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old. How did I know that? Because I'd already been conditioned to experiences. The experience that I knew was, is if a dog bites you or something happens to you, you fall down and you are bleeding or damaged in any way, grown-ups freak. They look for a cause, blame, and so forth and so on. And I knew even at that very tender age that this little dog was going to be in trouble. And so was I. For something I did innocently. Now, the reason I tell that story is because every one of us has a friend, has somebody in our world that we're looking at right now, whether it be on the TV or something we hear, or the internet, or we personally know them, or we see them in passing. We see a sign in their yard and we identify with what their beliefs are and so forth. That we immediately either want to reach out and shake their hand, be a part of it with them, or we want to shun them and be apart from them. We need to go within consciousness, I think, and re-examine that. What is really happening to us right there? What is happening? My belief is that we are functioning on a much more shallow level than we really need to and are capable of. We're capable of a much deeper connection. So let's all, if we can this year, try to march forward in consciousness in order to grasp the idea that just because somebody has a different way of looking at life than we do, doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make them less than. If someone speaks a different language than we do, it does not make them foreign. If someone's skin color is different than ours, or the shape of their eyes is different than ours, it doesn't make them the other. It simply makes them part of our experience if we allow it to be a part of our experience. The other thing I think we can do is this afternoon, go home and take a nap. You'll feel much better and adjust yourselves to this loss of sleep. God bless.